Praise be to God, there is no other God except God. Most scientists do not believe that God exists. And if you ask them why, they usually say, because we cannot prove God with scientific experiments. And some atheists among them go even further, pretending that there are experiments which disprove the existence of God. They will come up with lousy ideas for scientific experiments. For example, they might say, if there is a God, let him hit me with lightning right now. And then once the lightning doesn't hit them, which normally doesn't, they will say, see, no lightning hit me, so there is no God. They just don't understand that a God who would be pressured by the demands of his enemies into doing what they wanted him to do, that would not be a God. God is not ruled by the expressions and desires of humans. But still, can there be a scientific experiment which would prove the existence of God? Well, let's think of it. Why would we want to prove the existence of God? A disbeliever would say it's because we don't see him. Well, a grain seed does not see the sun. So if we humans were grain seeds, how would we prove that the sun exists? Of course, some grain seeds, when they fall into the ground, they do not produce anything good. They remain underneath the soil without producing a grain plant. And underneath the soil, they cannot see the sun anyway. But they also never feel the warmth of the sun. But there are other grain seeds which form roots, and then that enables them to grow. And once they grow above the soil, they start to feel the warmth of the sun. And they grow even more because of that. So now the grain seeds, which became useful, have started to feel the sun. But they still don't see the sun. And imagine them telling the other grain seeds, which are underneath the soil, that there is a sun. They respond that it's not possible because we haven't seen him. And you haven't seen him either. How do you know that there is a sun? It's because our life depends on it. Well, our life doesn't seem to depend on it. We are still underground and we don't feel its warmth. So we are still not going to believe. So now we have two types of grain seeds. The ones which became useful and grew, and now they believe that there is a sun because they feel the sun rays on them. And the other grain seeds which were not useful for anything and remained underneath the ground, and as a result they do not believe that the sun exists. But let's say that these two types of grain seeds wanted to create an experiment which would prove the existence of the sun. And remember that none of them see it, but one group of them feels it, while the other doesn't. But what type of experiment would enable the grain seeds to detect the sun when they don't have eyes to see light? Well, such an experiment already exists, and it is called the photoelectric effect. It was discovered or explained by Albert Einstein, for which he won the Nobel Prize. A lot of people think that Einstein was given the Nobel Prize in physics for his famous discovery of the theory of relativity. But actually he was given the Nobel Prize for one of his side discoveries, which is called the photoelectric effect. Basically, he was one of the group of people who effectively discovered how to turn light into sound. Basically, the light, when it hits the atoms, it gives energy to the electrons, and if it's sufficient light, it will cause the atom to release an electron. But one electron is undetectable. You cannot sense one electron only. But we can use a photomultiplier, which is simply a device with many cesium mirrors, which release 2 electrons every time one electron hits them. So now you can put a mirror to mirror the first mirror, and the third mirror to mirror the second mirror, and in this way the electrons are doubled each time they hit a new cesium mirror. So from one electron we get 2, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, and then 32, and so on. And after 12 mirrors reflecting each other's electrons in a row, now we have 4096 electrons. And 4000 electrons are sufficient to be detected as electricity. And if we simply attach a speaker at the end of that electricity, we get sound out of it. And speakers already existed when Einstein explained how light turns into electricity. So with this device, called the photomultiplier, which is simply a tube with many mirrors in it, we turn one photon of light into a sound which we humans can hear. So even if we were blind, with this device we would be able to know whether there is light or no light in a particular direction and place. So in a similar way, the only way that those grain seeds could know whether there is a sun or not is if they turned the light somehow into sound, which they can hear. So that would be the scientific experiment which proves the existence of the sun for plants. Now, in the same way, it is possible for humans under perfect conditions to hear God, even though they can't see him. So in theory, hearing God would prove the existence of God, even if you don't see him. However, someone might say that still doesn't not prove the existence of God, because you don't know if you are hearing God or the voice of someone else. The example with the grain seeds would be like this. Some grain seeds still would continue not to believe in the sun, because they would claim that since the photomultiplier can produce sound even when you hit it with artificial light, without any sunlight, then we cannot know whether the sound which we heard from the photomultiplier is a result of the sun, or maybe it's a result of an artificial light bulb, or maybe a candle which you put nearby. Well, there is a way to distinguish those different sources of light. Each of those sources of light has a specific pattern embedded in it, and those patterns are called light absorption spectral lines. Basically, all white light, which we see, it's a composition of different colors. And once it passes through a simple prism, it diverges into its different color subcomponents, like the rainbow. And then, depending on where the light came from and through what environment it passed, it will have lines, black lines, embedded in that spectrogram. And the light which comes from the sun has a specific, unique pattern of those black lines, which cannot be imitated by artificial light sources. So it's similar to the barcodes which they use in the supermarkets. And depending on the widths and the distances of those lines, the computer is able to identify which products were sold. In the same way, those patterns in the sunlight are unique to the light of the sun only. A neon light has a different pattern, a candle light has a different pattern, an LED light has a different pattern, and so on. And in this way, by knowing that no one else can produce that pattern, the grain seeds would be able to know that it must be another source of light, which cannot be faked by other grain seeds, which they can call sunlight. So in this way, the seeds which have grown above the ground can believe that the sun exists, even though they don't have eyes to see it. They can know it through a scientific experiment which converts sunlight into sound, and which has a pattern which is impossible to imitate by artificial light sources on Earth. And in the same way, we as humans, even if we don't see God, we can know that God exists through hearing His word, which is unique, unlike any human word. It has a specific pattern which the believers are able to recognize, while the disbelievers are unable to understand and believe in it. So there is already a scientific experiment which proves the existence of God. It's called the Quran, and it has a specific mathematical pattern in it, which cannot be imitated by any other book. And God willing, I will give further details and explanations about it elsewhere.